Hi, Giant Builders. So, our next guest, I had a great conversation about curiosity. So, are you curious in our four pillars? Spiritual, health, family, and business? Let's see what it really means.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is the Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hey, Giant Builders. A few ideas came up for me during this conversation with our next guest. And so I'm going to share some links below of previous episodes that I think you might find interesting. Hey, Giant Builders, welcome, and I'm glad that you are here. Today's guest is Leslie Galloway. Hi, Leslie, how are you?
Lois, how are you? I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I'm happy you are here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So, I am a leadership coach. I founded a company in 2020 called Interleap Group, and I work with leaders. It's interesting. I work with them to help them love their life and work again. And we say that because I think that when we look at leadership, and that's a word that I think has been diluted heavily over the years. There is such pressure on leaders today. And I think, we see it. I work with a lot of women, I work with a lot of men. And I think that because people are pulled in so many different directions, especially in leadership positions, that I think a lot of people lose themselves. And so my work with them is really to help um, leaders who feel like they're stuck in a mindset or a level or in some way, shape, or form, figure out how to transform and emerge into another phase. And I this is I'm so grateful I get to do this work.
Oh, that's great. Well, how do you feel leaders can kind of identify their mindsets and shift those beliefs?
I think what's interesting is that, most of us think about behavior. We think about changing behavior, right? Like that's what we wish we did something differently. And what's interesting is, you know, when you really peel the layers back, you realize that the issues are in, and you just said it, our beliefs. But I don't think typically we get to those things. So, when we are, it's always our thoughts and beliefs that are informing behaviors. And so, um, there's a lot of discovery work that goes on with clients. And of course, all client relationships are different. But I find myself always focusing on, if there is an issue shifting something in a mindset, then we're asking, what are you believing about that thing that keeps you from moving in a certain direction?
Hmm. So do you find like a more typical belief that leaders especially have?
Say more about your question.
Well, I'm thinking that is there something that, especially leaders of businesses, is there something that they typically have in their minds that are blocking them?
I would say yes. I think that I think anytime we're stuck somewhere, there's we can trace it back to a belief. And when you ask me that, I think about, it could be as a business owner that you have if there's an issue with growing a business, you might have a real scarcity mindset potentially, right? So we all have some sort of story growing up about money or resources, or are they scarce? Are they abundant? Right. And we know that when we're trying to grow something, we want to make it bigger. We're trying to create things. We can't do that very well if we are afraid, right? If we don't think we have enough, it's sort of like I think about um if we're holding our hands like this and everything's mine and, resources are scarce and time is scarce and versus if I have an abundant perspective, there's generosity, there's a belief that there's more, right? That things are possible, that things don't feel limited. Um, and that may take different shapes and forms for a lot of clients, but it when you can get to the thing that's keeping you to the belief that's keeping you stuck somewhere, that's where the opportunity is to bust it open and figure out how to come out and find a path forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think that, I don't know, maybe is it a generational thing you think, as far as like being concerned of like scarcity and just not having enough? I find that quite often with the people that I'm surrounded by.
And you're saying is it more of a generational thing? Is it more your generation, or tell me more about the people
Yeah, I think most of the people
about
are in my age range, around the 60s. And um, I think that we have this mentality that maybe a big portion of us didn't grow in a wealthy family. And we're brought up with the concept that, well, we have to save our money. We have to, we can't just go out and buy everything that we want.
I think that's absolutely true. I do think it's generational. I think it's, our parents passed down their beliefs about money and resources. And you're right. There is such a distinction I see, even when I look at my clients, you know, the ones who are in maybe their mid 30s who have very big jobs. They also have big resources. There is a different level of possibility in their minds, right? Versus, to your point, someone who inherited, who adopted, maybe subconsciously, likely, usually it is subconsciously, beliefs around, but there's not enough for me to do this. And I mean, just that simple mindset of, I don't believe that there's enough. I don't believe that there's enough time, that there's enough money, that there are enough connections, that there are enough ideas, that there are enough, is in the collection of like the compound effect, right? Of a scarcity mindset in lots of different places. Um, it's hard to push through that if you don't know you have it, right? And if you don't know to challenge the belief to say, wait, this is not serving what I'm really trying to create here. And I think most of us don't see it, so we don't challenge it, and then we can't move forward.
So in your information you sent me, you talked about the power of curiosity. Can you expand on that for me?
Yeah, it's so directly related to what we're talking about. I think that oftentimes we talk about how curiosity, the opposite of curiosity, is judgment. And it's related to this topic that we're playing around with because typically anything that comes up, it could be someone else, it could be a circumstance. Um, if something hard happens or something we might perceive as negative or um, something at face value appear to go our way. With a limited mindset, with judgment, we shut it down, right? We either play victim, we're frustrated, we blame circumstances, we blame ourselves, we blame other people. And then the antidote to that is is really curiosity and stepping back and saying, well, this is interesting, right? Because if you look at, there's a great, just a great framework that we call CT-FAR. And the top of it is looking at thoughts, and inter we can interchange that with beliefs. And our thoughts drive our feelings, they drive our actions, and ultimately they drive our behavior, then they drive our results. But if we drew this line from, sorry, let me explain that again. A circumstance would be at the top. So you and I are talking about something that might happen to us, right? I have a dear friend who got a tough autoimmune diagnosis. This was years ago. And I'll never forget, Lois, I was so struck when she said, this has been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And you would think, how is that possible? And so what we're saying is the circumstance is the diagnosis. What comes after that is the thought. Is it good? Is it bad? And then that's going to drive everything else after that, which ultimately drives results. So when I think about this particular friend, her decision and thought and belief was that that actually was an amazing blessing. It created new perspectives for her. It created a different path forward for health that, intersected with her faith. I mean, there were so many different things. But to me, there was curiosity in that versus judgment. So when I think of curiosity, I think of it as it opens up so much, right? Judgment closes everything down. And the statistics around curiosity are that curiosity up until age 5, something like 99% of kids are curious. They're open-minded, they ask questions. Between the age of 5 and 25, when we get to the age of 25, they say that roughly 99% of people don't think out of the box. And you can look at our educational system and say, well, a lot of it's driven by that, right? Like, I'm going to learn answers in school, and then I'm graded on how I, repeat those answers to you. So we lose a lot of curiosity along the way, right? We just kind of quit thinking. People don't really ask us to think. They ask us to memorize or be right and yet when I think about curiosity and I think about the people I love being around, and let's even just consider how divisive our world is right now. The people that you struggle with and that I struggle with the most are the least curious. Because you and I might not agree on something, and yet if I'm curious, I'm wondering what I might learn from you, right? And I'm going to show up open and disarmed, and we can connect with that. But the opposite is true when I come in and I've already decided what you think of something, and I have no learning posture about it. I mean, I could still walk away from a conversation with you and say, Lois, I still actually don't agree, but I had no idea that these 3 things were true, or I've never heard it put that way. Right. And that's a really interesting perspective. I mean, how different could it be if we all worked from that angle? So the curiosity thing to me and our business has been so interesting as it is permeates all angles. You look at innovation, you look at the way we show up organizationally. Like, if we aren't a curious organization, if we don't have curious leaders, we're missing so much. So I gave you such a long answer. I don't know if any of that hopefully you've got something that makes sense there.
No, that was great. I mean, it really intrigued me as far as I think that's a lot of what's wrong with our country these days is that we are just on the judgmental pole. and not curious about how somebody else is thinking, whether you agree with them or not, but just wanting to open that conversation of saying, hey, what do you think? And just listening. Yeah, I mean, especially with just even our everyday things. I mean, you could look at the big things like, oh, the government and things like that, but just like everyday things that people just drop a judgment on, and especially on social media.
Yes. I mean, that's where we definitely see it the most. But even as I have conversations with my 11-year-old, and I talk with her a lot about what it looks like to be a good friend. Of course, we're navigating middle school, which we all remember is something we never want to go back to. But
That was
um
terrible.
dear, and now I remember why. But it is really just considering how you show up with people, how you show up as, I mean, leaders, we have such a responsibility toward it. But I think that if you flip it around and you think about whether it's your team members or your, you know, partners or different people you come in contact with, I think the least effective people are not curious, right? They don't say, "Hey, how are you?" Or even, "I wonder what's happening in our business that we could do something different." Or, it's like we're so drawn to people who want to learn. Um, and so it just touches so many different aspects of life and work. And our world would be such a different place, I think, if we all practice this more.
And obviously, curiosity is what creates the innovations that we've been seeing is just tremendous, a lot of changes every year.
It drives everything. I mean, it's people sitting around and saying, I wonder how these could work better, right? Or I don't like the way this works. And instead of I don't like it, I'm going to judge it, and then, that's the end of it. It's I wonder why I don't like it, and I wonder why it doesn't work, and how could it work better? Yeah, and I think that, to me, it's also so powerful because one of the things that I work with clients a lot on is, from a leadership style, command and control is just not effective, right? Pushing people is not effective. Pulling them and getting them to weigh in, and it can feel a little bit slower to leaders, and yet it's so much more effective, right? I mean, we can have a short-term win maybe with pushing people and telling them what to do and directing them, but when you are more of a coaching leader, you're using questions that are helping people learn to think for themselves, and it changes the landscape of an organization. It's slower, but I think that what I see so much from leaders that so many people struggle with is, I don't want to delegate that. I'm going to continue to manage and be the person who controls the work and does it and is in all the meetings, um and then they can't they can't ever get above the work, right? It's like that phrase, they're trading great work for good work, right? They never get to do the bigger picture vision and strategic thinking, and because they can't let go of the control and the management. And when you become more of a coaching leader, which in essence is from a place of curiosity, right? And helping guide them with questions, not advice. Um, it it changes leaders, it changes teams, it changes organizations. People are happier. You know, they get to contribute more, they take more ownership, And at the basis is at the basis of that is really curiosity. So it just touches so much.
Yeah, so a lot of the things you're saying right now were really impressed on me on the book, The One Big Thing, which I did a previous episode on. So much of that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
saying is just like kind of like that. You've got to focus on your one thing and then go from there and build up to it. I think that's a, I think that really fits into what you're saying about a leadership style that has success.
You know what comes up when you say that too, Lois, is just that I think this is impacting our families. Like it's got so many, and just because I see a lot of what you talk about and have listened to, sort of your passion around different guests, and it's not just our work. So it's not that it's affecting leaders from a burnout perspective, but it's also then affecting the way they show up at home, right? Because if they're doing everything at work, and unfortunately, this I think especially impacts women. I'm not saying it doesn't impact men, but I think you can be everything, right? You can do all of these things. And when you're feeling like you are controlling all of the things in your life and your work, we don't have the capacity to show up in curiosity. I mean, maybe you try to be, maybe you can plug that in when you're in flow or at your best, but then you get home and you're the least curious parent or spouse, or, I mean, it comes out somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it as far as it really is a big deal in all four of our pillars, our spiritual pillar, our health pillar, our family pillar, our business pillar. It's a really important point in all of those. At least if you want to grow.
If you want to grow, that's a great point. And I mean, I tend to assume everyone does. I don't actually think that's true. But I do think that's ingrained in our makeup. I mean, I believe God created us with the desire to grow and to create and be more like him, and um but I don't know that everybody sees it like that. So you're right. I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, what would a first meeting be like with you?
So when I first meet with a client, especially from a one-to-one perspective, it's really actually a coaching meeting for me. I want to know. A first session it's a bit of discovery, just to find out. I mean, if people are coming to me, then they want to grow. They know they're stuck somewhere. Something doesn't feel, there's enough tension that I've been trying to figure this out on my own, and I need outside counsel for me to get from where I am now to somewhere, you know, much more compelling in the future. And I don't know how to do that alone. And so um, there are a lot of questions. There are lots of, I like to mine to figure out where they are and what is really at play and what is making them stuck. And, I think it's tough for a lot of people, because if I were to ask you, if we were even to broach the subject of dreams, I think, and that's a big word for people. It feels kind of esoteric. I think it's a big word to me, and I do this for a living, but I think people have really lost track of themselves, right? Like we kind of go down this road and we were supposed to do this and we got out of school and then we pursued this and then maybe we got married. We just put one foot in front of the other. And I was actually listening to a podcast this morning from with an author who was saying just driving this point home that she couldn't even tell you what her favorite food was or what, what she loved because she just had become so disconnected with that person. And I think that happens so much with leaders, especially, right? Like, how am I serving everybody and kind of climbing this ladder? And um, I'm going to say this because this is what just came up for me, but one of my favorite definitions of leadership is a leader is someone with a passion for something and that makes people want to follow them. And I thought to myself, and I think a lot of the people I begin to work with initially, they've lost that thing, right? Like they might be in a leadership position, but they forgot, why do they even care, about what they're doing? And I just don't think we can show up in an inspirational way because really the purpose of leadership is that you have an idea or you have a story and other people want to join Lois and whatever her vision is, right? Like they like what you do and they want to be a part of it. And if 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 our leaders aren't dialed into that, then how in the world, do we engage people to then go create things together? So I lost track of your question, and I'm sorry if I just gave you the longest answer.
I'm just asking about a first meeting with you.
Oh my goodness. So yes, a lot comes up in that first meeting. And I like to coach people in our first meeting because I want them to understand, what does this feel like? Because a lot of people don't really know what coaching is. We kind of throw that word around a lot in our culture. Um, so we go pretty deep in our first session.
So talk about your first meeting. Are there different ways that people can meet with you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like most coaches, and this isn't always true, but I started my business as a one-to-one, in a one-to-one capacity. So that's how I began working with clients 10 years ago. And what's been interesting to see, and I also did a lot of team workshops. And so um, there's oftentimes a combination of engagements. But what's been really fun, Lois, is I've seen things change over the years, and it's a really big part of our business at Interleap is group coaching. So we run several groups that are virtual. They're both virtual and in person, but the majority of them have been virtual, and that works really well for leaders. Um, and so there might be 6 leaders in a conversation. It could be 8 weeks. It could be something that's ongoing 6 months to a year, sort of like a mastermind. Um, and then oftentimes there's a one-to-one component that supports that. So I think that really engaging with clients in various ways can really compound the efficacy of a coaching engagement relationship.
Yeah, it sounds like the group would also be great because you can get information or tips from the other people in the group too.
The group coaching, I think Forbes named it one of the most powerful experiences because you're to that exact point, people are listening to each other. They're responding to things real time with people. And we know that community is how we get change, right? You're seeing people show up. You might not want to be there, but listening to other people process things that you might not be able to articulate, but then Lois starts to talk about it and you think, wait, that's exactly what I've been feeling. Gives people, I think, clarity. It gives them permission. They feel like they're not alone. And then a one-to-one session combined with that, again, just helps them drive change even deeper. And I love the group because I get to see how my clients operate in the context of a social experience, right? And the things that might not come up one to one because they're focusing on something very specific, I can see the patterns for them that are coming up around context and other topics so that I'm better equipped to coach them because I see, there's that phrase, the way we do anything is the way we do everything. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's
I have. Yeah.
pretty interesting, right? And so you can see the groups just, I think, really reveal a lot, and then people get community. And I think that's something that we're all kind of missing, honestly.
Great. Well, any closing thoughts?
I think I would just encourage people. One of the things that I've heard so much about, so we run a group, and we run a group probably 3 times a year, whenever it's our flagship group. And I always hear people say, because this is what we do, you know what, this probably isn't a good time. Like, maybe I'll do it the next time. Right. And we all do that. We all think, you know what, maybe growth is not for me right now. Right. I mean, we're all right there. I'll do it later. I'll do it in the fall, or I'll do it, in the winter. And I think I would just say to your audience, as they think about anything that comes up when I say that for them, like, what is the thing that they keep saying next time to? That there would just be an invitation to lean in somewhere, right? To name that thing. And of course, I'm always going to say, I think coaching is such a brilliant path to growth. I'm a client and I'm a coach. I drink the Kool-Aid, but I just think for your audience to say, hey, what is that thing? And maybe even identifying a community or a group or a coach that they're just willing to say, I'm not gonna put up with that thing anymore. Like, I want to see change somewhere, in this is a place that I want to see shift, and I'm gonna grab somebody and I'm gonna figure out how to do that. That would just be maybe my parting invitation to them.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, I'm full-plunged into coaching. I think it's wonderful. So, Giant Builders, we're gonna have Leslie's information below, so please feel free to reach out to her, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.